not come across them yet. They are a contact call. They are formed in the first year of a calf's life, and they are used to keep group cohesion with their conspecifics, and it's individual to the animal as well. So this is what's been used in bottlenose dolphins, but my project's going to be taking this and looking in other species and how it can be used as other ways as a monitoring tool. So the project, or SWORD, and you'll hear the term SWORD in a couple of presentations over the next couple of days. SWORD stands for Signature Occurrence, Recapture and Density, and the project started up in Namibia, and basically the idea was to use signature whistles as individual labels or acoustic labels, and if we can acoustically monitor a population, can we use it for the same purposes that we use photo ID for? And this was a proof of concept and designed up in Namibia with a very small population of bottlenose dolphins up there, and lots of work has gone into it over the last couple of years, and Longden et al. In 2020 actually showed for the first time that there's a mark recapture was possible, and that very, very similar estimates of population could come out from both the photo ID study and also using signature whistles. And Namibia was a great area to do proof of concept here because they've got over 10 years of photo ID catalogues, but also a very long-standing signature whistle catalogue and a good understanding of their population of dolphins up there. But what we really wanted to know was, can this be transferred to other populations, and more importantly perhaps, can it be transferred to other species around other areas? So this is where my project comes into the SWORD project. So I'm working obviously with the Indian Ocean humpback dolphin and endangered species around our coastline here. Over nearly 20 years, photo ID catalogues were collated, and we saw that there was about 247 individuals around South Africa. Since 2017, we've found a few more individuals, and we've got about 60 individuals to add to the national catalogue. But all in all, we're working with a very, very small population of less than 500 individuals, stretched all the way along our coastline in very, very small groups, very shallow waters, often putting themselves in the surf area of the breakers, which actually is very, very difficult, therefore, for us to study them and photograph them. Hence, over 17 odd years, we have a very, very small population. You can actually see here in the red, that's their coastal range around South Africa. So it's a very, very linear, straight range. They don't go further than 25 metres. It limits them to about 1 to 2 kilometres off the shore. We, in South Africa specifically, from our photo ID catalogues and from visual confirmation, we actually have 2 separate subpopulations. So that 500 has already halved into the Southern Cape population and a northeast population up in KZN, which is Bay Area. But apart from what we know from our photo IDs, what do we know in terms of acoustics? So very little is the answer. We don't have a lot of recordings before the project, and so the whole vocal repertoire is largely unknown, and a large proportion of my PhD is actually just understanding the vocal repertoire of this species. There has been some signature whistle reports and evidence for it in other Sousa species around the world, and we've got a growing body of evidence for that signature whistles are produced by humpback dolphins here in South Africa. The other things that we have to bear in mind is that actually humpback dolphins occur sympatrically with other whistling dolphin species. So as opposed to up in Namibia, where the only whistling dolphin species you're going to get is your bottlenose dolphin, down here, you're doing any sort of PAM work or passive acoustic work, you could be getting any number of one of the whistling dolphin species that we get down here. And then finally, they like to do very long, complicated, multi-loop disconnected whistles. So they're not those simple, nice upsweeps. So if you're doing any sort of automated classification or identification, it adds a little bit layer of complexity in terms of these whistles themselves are a little bit longer and more complex. And I was talking about the range in which these dolphins occur, and it's right on that forefront of human expansion. So it's really important that we are putting in long-term, sustainable solutions to monitor these populations around the South African coastline, because they're really at the forefront of a lot of threats. And so long-term monitoring, potentially through acoustics, could really be beneficial for South Africa's humpback dolphins. So this is where a lot of our data is coming from, our photo ID data in the South Cape Coast, and I'll be focusing on the subpopulation of the South Cape Coast for this talk. And so this is where a lot of our research has been done in terms of boat-based data collection. For my proof of concept in terms of can we use signature whistles for individual monitoring, I focused on Mossel Bay last year, which is a very well-known humpback dolphin location. We have lots of research there, students have worked there before in terms of land-based and boat-based identification for humpback dolphins. So it made sense for us to do one of our first long-term arrays in Mossel Bay. So this is the Mossel Bay in the centre of this map, and you can see this light green here is their supposed range. So that's 25-metre boundary. But actually, when we overlay visual confirmation and visual surveys, you can see they're even more coastal than we would have expected them to be. And so this is where I deployed my first long-term array for humpback dolphins last year. And these were some of the questions that we were really trying to answer with our very first long-term array. So first of all, can we even identify humpback dolphins from our passive acoustic recordings and differentiate them from other dolphin species? How important is our location? So we know from our work up in Namibia that location is really, really important. These are contact calls, and so they are very behaviour dependent. So we know that for bottlenose dolphins, the location of your hydrophones is really important. Even a few kilometres can totally change what type of whistles you're getting detected. So is this the same for humpback dolphins, and to what extent? And then also, what is the production of signature whistle types of humpback dolphins to support the long-term study? So this is what we did. We did, again, a linear array to follow that range along the coastline. We deployed 8 moorings, each about 1 kilometre apart. And you can see we did really, really coastal, shallow deployments. Just behind, obviously, safe areas, toss up of keeping your equipment safe, but also getting the humpback dolphins. So we try to avoid any reefs. We try to put it in a mix of locations. So we know from previous work that down in the south here, where the port is, that's where they like to hang out and socialise and rest. And there's a lot of travelling around Seal Island. We often see them moving past Seal Island around Mooring 4. And then at the north side, that's where the reefs are. So typically a lot of feeding behaviours there. So hopefully we're getting a mix of behaviours through our array deployment there. So once we had deployed all of that recorders, we had them out for 18 days to start off with. That gave us nearly 3,000 hours of continuous recordings. So then we had to come up with a way to get around the whole idea of there's some patch of whistling dolphins in the area. So that's what we came up with, working with mainly Panguard, and we developed a species classifier there using the whistle and moan detector to identify dolphin contours, and then also did species classification through test data to back that up. So it was a very, very long-winded process to get through all this data and to figure out where the humpback dolphins were. First of all, we had to look at our soundscape of our recordings. There was a lot of boat noise in some of our moorings down by the harbour, the commercial slipway. There was also a lot of chain noise around the island. There's a lot of buoys there on chains, so that made it a little bit more difficult. And then we looked at basically the areas where there was whistling dolphins, and then we're using the whistle and moan detector, and then we're using encounter duration, and looked at whistling behaviour as well to split that up into encounters, and then we could do our species classification from that. So I'm going to focus a little bit more now on our species classification module. So specifically, a lot of the work has gone into identifying which species are we looking at. We can very easily see that that's a dolphin, but understanding which dolphin species that is has been very, very difficult, we found out. So first of all, we've had to define our encounters, and this has all come through the species classifier modules of Panguard at the moment. And so then we're looking at the probability of if that contour is a humpback dolphin contour, and that's based on test data that we've developed. And if it's 0.6, 0.8 or higher, we accept it as humpback dolphin. And then we look at a proportion of humpback dolphin contours within an encounter. If more than half of the contours are a humpback dolphin, then we accept it as a Sousa, and then there's visual confirmation at the end. So this is a whole post-processing process. And a lot of that test data came from dolphins around the coastline, that boat-based data that I was talking about before, including some things in Mozambique, which is the video there you can see. Turn me there. And this is what it looked like. We did a bit of manual verification afterwards to make sure that we were along the right lines. And you can see there, this is an excerpt from the Panguard. And so you can see the first section there is your humpback dolphin encounter. And you can tell that because you've got a little clump of contours, and then your click detector at the bottom aligns with echolocation clicks. And then there's a very good example at the end there of chain noise. We had a lot of chain noise in some of our moorings. And that actually then you can see there's no click to echolocation in your click detector. So it was about using a multitude of different techniques and group sizes and whistle production rates and things to come up with figuring out where our humpback dolphins were in our results. So eventually we got there. We eventually found some signature whistles. In our 18 days, across 6 of our hydrophones, the last 2 actually failed. But across 6 of moorings, we found 7 signature whistle types. And you can see it was quite interesting. There was a clear variation in terms of production. So some signature whistle types were produced more often than others. For example, 40 and 05. And then the red one at the beginning, that was mooring 1 by the harbour. So there was a greater number of signature whistles produced around that harbour area. Then as you go through the array, they get less so. We also had the signature whistle type 1, 5, and 10, and 14. These were previously seen whistle types from our boat-based data. And then we actually had 3 new whistle types that we included, 40, 43, and 45. But what was the main thing that we really wanted to find out was not just the PAM side of things, but how did this compare to photo ID and traditional boat-based data collection. So while we were out there in Mossel Bay, while the recorders were out recording, we were able to get on the boat as often as possible. And so we were, when weather conditions allowed, we got on the boat. We did boat-based recordings when we found dolphins, humpback dolphins, and also did photo ID data to try and get a number of individuals in the area. So these are the individuals that we saw across our, we actually were out for 9 days. So again, we had only half the number of days that the equipment was deployed were we able to get onto the water. And you can see there that 5 of the individuals matched our national catalogue, and 6 of them were recaptured more than once. So in terms of recaptures of individuals, acoustic monitoring seemed like it had a higher number of recaptures. And all in all, we saw that we can identify signature whistle types from our long-term moorings. We also highlighted that location was important in humpback dolphins, like we kind of thought it would be. In those areas, because it's a contact call, when you've got those social behaviours, there's more signature whistles being produced. But also, as they're travelling past areas such as Seal Island, we've got very, very few signature whistle types on mooring 3. And then ultimately, there is lower production rates of whistles in general for humpback dolphins. And so if we're comparing the feasibility of this method for a species such as humpback dolphins in comparison to a species such as bottlenose dolphins, it's something to bear in mind that an 18-day deployment, we've had very, very few whistles. And also detections, but we're working with a much smaller population. They're much more solitary, and that cohesion call is probably not as used as highly as it is in, say, bottlenose dolphins. So that's where we were from the end of last year, and so future work is to do it again, but for longer, with more units, to get more capture histories, to get more signature whistle types detected, and then hopefully put that into a market capture framework to answer a few more questions for the PhD and future project. And I actually, the day before coming down here, I brought out some of the hydrophones that I've had in the water for over a month. So as soon as I get back from Kruger, I'm going to start analysing those. I promise, Simon. I will be as soon as I get back, if not tomorrow. And so yeah, that's going to be the next big thing. Is we did it in more locations. We did not just Mossel Bay, but we deployed units in Neisner and also Plettenberg Bay, and they were out for over a month. So we've kind of scaled up through some very generous grants, And yes, so it's all going well, and hopefully next time at the next ABC we'll be presenting some more mark recapture data from our signature whistles of humpback dolphins.